Hi everyone, welcome to Book Talks with Kiki. I'm Kiki, let's talk about books. Today we are tier ranking the 31 books I have read in Q3 of 2025. This is the third video of these that I've done. I've done it for Q1 and Q2 of 2025, so you can check out my channel for more of those videos if you're interested. But yeah, we're just gonna get right into it. Let's go over the tier lists really fast. So up top, we have Book of All Time. This is my personal top tier literary canon. It's one of my favorite books of all time. The writing blew my mind. I go feral thinking about these books. These are just literally books of all time. I don't know, it's not that hard. Second one down, we've got new favorites. I loved these books, okay? These are new favorites of mine. I love them, okay? These might have some 5 stars that maybe just weren't quite book of all time, but these are usually my 4.5 to 5 stars. Then we have Want on My Shelf. I really liked this book, and it's a book that if I don't already own, I would pay money to buy it and put it on my shelf because I liked it. I would come back to it. Thank you to my library. I enjoyed my time reading this book. Perhaps it wasn't my favorite. I don't necessarily know if I would reread it again, but I didn't hate my life reading it. So these are just kind of not middling books. Middling books are the next tier down, but I didn't love the book. I wasn't quite annoyed by it or anything. I think it had some good literary moments. So yeah, and I call it thank you to my library because it's well, at least I don't have to buy the book. Unfortunately, for this quarter, I was reading a lot of books off of my physical TBR, so a lot of these I actually did already spend money on. So thank you to my library might not always be books I'm getting just through my library, but they would have been books that, had I known what their quality was going into it, I would have not bought it and just read it through my library. Hopefully that makes sense. Will I remember it? It's a question, I haven't quite forgotten any of these books yet, but it's well, will I remember it? These are the more middling books where I don't hate it, but it was mid to me. Cardinal Sin. So a book can commit a cardinal sin by boring, annoying, or disappointing me. So I will tell you why they ended up here, but usually it's a combination of all three things at once. It's like a Venn diagram for all of these books. So that's a cardinal sin. And then at the very bottom, we have worst books or DNF'd. So some of these 31 books, I didn't actually fully finish. I did DNF them, and we'll talk about those when we get there. But this is reserved for books that I either wish I DNF'd or I just DNF'd because they were just so bad. Alrighty, so with the tier explanation out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. These are, I don't think they're in much order. Okay, we're going to start this off great with 5 Broken Blades by May Corland, I believe. So this is going straight to worst books, DNF. I did DNF it. I DNF'd it 30 pages in. I ranted about this book, even though I only read 30 pages. I ranted about it for 15 minutes in one of my physical TBR diary videos. So check those out. Honestly, check those videos out if you want in-depth reviews on any of these books, because like I said, I read a lot of these through working through my physical TBR. So they're in a lot of my vlog videos where I talk about my physical TBR. But I hated this book. I think this book is legitimately awful. I think it takes the cake for being the worst book I've read this quarter, perhaps even this year. It's not good, y'all. It's not. I'm sorry. Thankfully, I don't think this book has too many ride or die stands. Even the 5-star reviews that I've seen, which yes, sometimes I like to hurt myself by reading 5-star reviews of books I absolutely hated. Even the 5-star reviews I've read, they were oh, it was just so fun. And I was listen, we have a different definition of fun, but if at least all you can say about this book is that it was fun, because there certainly is not a lot else to say. Okay, I gotta stop. Whew. I can't let my hater flag fly too much in this video. Ooh. Okay, well, these are a tough couple of books to start with, and I'm sure people are gonna love this. 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Cardinal Sin. It is not the worst book I've read, but I did give it 2 stars. It annoyed me, deeply annoyed me, and it disappointed me. You all gas, and I shouldn't say you all, people gas this book up like it should have won the Pulitzer Prize. And I don't know what y'all are reading, and I'm reading a different book because I was very disappointed by it. I thought it was very shallow. There's just so much showing, not telling. There was absolutely no true depth at all. It just seemed like it was a book about vibes and drama. And listen, if you want a book about aesthetics, it's a cool aesthetic time period. It's just a cool vibe, and it has a lot of drama in it. I guess read this book, but the way people talk about this book, I'm no, can't do it, sorry. Okay, The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. I read this in July, and I absolutely love this book. This is straight up book of all time. I was so jaw-dropped when I finished this book. I was flabbergasted. I was very upset. Again, I had like a whole 30-minute reaction video to this book. I think in episode 3 or 4 of my physical TBR diaries. So watch that. I think this book is brilliant. I'm already like, when can I reread it? I think it might have to be like a yearly reread in July. I think this book is probably the biggest surprise based on just how much I was expecting to like it versus how much I actually ended up liking it. Incredible. I love this book so much. I love everything it has to say. It's great. So Blood Over Brighthaven, we're gonna put her in, listen, I do have her on my shelves. However, I bought the book, so I read it for a book club. So I bought the book because I couldn't get it through my library, and anytime soon enough for the book club. But had I been able to get it through my library and had I known my feelings about the book afterwards, I definitely would have just taken it through my library. So I think it's going to go and thank you to my library. This was about a 3.5 for me. There were aspects of this book I really liked and enjoyed. I just think ML Wong is an excellent story crafter. They really understand the crafting of a story. She really gets it, how to introduce her characters, give them flaws, make them interesting, and plot beats in a story. I think it was plotted out fantastically. World building was all great. I liked that. It was just a little bit too, I don't know, obvious and heavy-handed for me, bordering to the point of juvenile. So that is where I kind of landed on this one. All right, next, Book of Madness and Cures. I don't think anyone's ever read this book. And you know what? I can't even say that I read it either because I only got 30 pages. I'm going to put it in DNF. It's not the worst book. So in fact, I'll put it in front of 5 Broken Blades because I like it more than 5 Broken Blades. I only read about 30 pages. I was just kind of in a reading slump when I started this book. It wasn't bad. There was, in fact, 1 or 2 quotes that I was actually very impressed by the writing on, but I was just a little bit bored by it. I did try to unhaul it at a secondhand bookstore, and they were like, we don't want this book because, again, no one has heard of it. It probably has no market for it. So I still have the book, and I did say if they wouldn't take it, I would probably give it another shot later. It is historical fiction set in 1500s Venice, which is very interesting setting. I was just in a very deep reading slump, like I said, and it was boring me a little bit too much at the start that I was like, if I try to push through this book, I don't know how long my reading slump will last. So we had to dodge that pretty fast. Okay, next we have Cannery Row by John Steinbeck. This is going to go on Want on my shelf. I do own it. I love John Steinbeck in general. I don't know, Cannery Row could honestly maybe be a new favorite too. I don't know, we'll put it top of the pile of one on my shelf, and then at the end we might rearrange some of these things once I kind of look at them all. I did like this one. It's a little bit hampered because it's just short and sweet, and it's not meant to be super deep or anything, but it has one of my favorite quotes of John Steinbeck of all time about how American men know more about coils in a Ford T40 or whatever, cars. They know more about cars than they do about the clitoris, and I legitimately, my jaw dropped when I read that. I laughed out loud. I absolutely love that quote. It also has 2 of my favorite characters, Doc, and the minorest of minor characters, Frankie. I tear up thinking about him, so I don't know, might be a new favorite. We'll see. Next we have Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Patton. This one is definitely a new favorite, just being beat out to be a book of all time, but I absolutely loved this book. This one was another one that made me tear up. I think I actually cried a little bit in this book. I just love stories about fathers and sons and not being able to understand each other. And then there's so many other deep themes in this book. It takes place right before South Africa becomes officially apartheid state, and it just has so many interesting, like I said, themes that I think are still really relevant, both on a personal level, just the interpersonal drama and interpersonal relationships and emotional impact is fantastic. And then as well, the political and sociological themes in this book are great as well. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. We might have to come back to this one because, again, I don't know if this is one that is Want on my shelf or Thank you to my library. Again, I do already own this book physically. I had bought this book through Book Outlet. It was $6, and I had really wanted to read this book. I thought this book was going to be a 5-star read for me, so I was like, I'm going to buy it. It's going to be perfect. I just love the sound of it. And then I think I did give it a 4-star. But I think because I had such high expectations, a little bit of it is disappointed. It's definitely not going to Cardinal Sin because it's not disappointing enough to warrant going to hell pretty much. But I don't know. We'll put it on Want on my shelf. Again, we will do some rearranging at the end. The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. Now, I'm torn on this one between putting it in DNF because I did DNF it. I got, I think, about 40% of the way through this book in July, or Cardinal Sin, because the reason I DNF'd it was that it deeply bored me. It was not a bad book compared to, I mean, even Book of Madness wasn't bad, but I was, I don't feel any really strongly about its writing quality. The Dutch House, I can tell, I know Ann Patchett's a good writer, but I was just so incredibly bored by it. I felt absolutely nothing by any of the characters whatsoever. We're going to put the Dutch House in DNF for now, and I'm going to put it at the top because honestly, I don't think I would pick it up again, but I can like objectively see that it was a good book. I just did not connect with it at all. Okay, Endling by Maria Riva. We're gonna put on, I think, new favorites. I loved this book. This one definitely made me cry multiple times. I just thought it was so interesting, and it was very funny. It was like sad and funny and just so poignant at the same time. I love how personal of a story it is. The author really inserts herself into this tale of Ukrainian bride markets and the extinction of snails. I don't know, it kind of just like blew me away. I think I read 4 or 5 of the long list of the Booker Prize of 2025, which they just announced the short list like last week, and this one did not make the short list, which, listen, I haven't read all of the books, especially haven't read all of the books on the short list. I think it was a miss. This was the best book I've read through the Booker Prize, and some of the books that I didn't really like got onto the short list, and I was like, I don't really understand what you guys are looking for, but I really recommend Endling. Everything's Fine by Cecilia Rabis. I'm going to say thank you to my library. I did own this book physically, but it was one that, in retrospect, I would have been fine not owning it, but I liked my experience with it. I actually liked this book way more than I thought I would. I rated it 3.5 stars. This is a literary fiction following Jess, who is a Black woman who ends up falling in love with a white coworker of hers who is a Republican man. And so it follows them through when they first start knowing each other in 2008 all the way through like 2016, and just how the political landscape is impacting their relationship and each other, and what that means about their morals and beliefs, because they both say that they believe these two things, but then they're with people who believe opposite things. So I would recommend everything in like Thank You to My Library and above. Like, I generally would recommend. It just depends on the reader. New favorites I would like recommend to anyone and everyone, because I think everyone should read these books. But like Thank You to My Library, I would still recommend these books depending on the person I was talking to. Okay, we're gonna skip A Farewell to Arms because that one was gonna take a while. Flesh by David Soleil. This was another one I read for the Booker long list. All right, I'm gonna put it in Will I Remember It, and it's in Will I Remember It because I didn't have a lot of like expectations for it, so it's not quite in like disappointed me. It did annoy me. It kind of brought it back at the end. I thought the last chapter of this book and the first chapter of this book are very, very strong. Everything in the middle I hated. I thought was a slog. It was a slog, not in the sense that it took me a long time to read. I read this book in less than a day. It's 25 pages or something, but I read it so extremely fast because it is 60% all dialogue, just all dialogue. And it's not like a monologue either. It is one word dialogue back and forth for pages and pages and pages. I've seen many reviews about this book about how it's saying so much about like masculinity and toxic masculinity and the suffering and loneliness of boys. And I'm like, I don't think it's really saying all that much, except okay. And yeah, like sure, it's implying something about manhood and masculinity. I don't actually think it is saying that much. While it has some interesting ideas in it, I really don't think it fully explores it that well. And I disliked how much time was skipped in this. So sorry if you have not read this book. This follows just one man, can't even remember his name, doesn't matter. This one man, as his life goes through these like roller coaster events, and so there's like 8 or 9 chapters, and they skip big parts of his life in between. And it's interesting because we're just kind of dropped into his life, and we have to kind of fill in the blanks of from when we last saw him, how he got into this situation, and why is he acting this way, which is an interesting, it is an engaging like thought exercise on that part. But for me, I think the author skipped some of the most interesting parts of his life, the parts of his life where he did the most changing, the parts of his life where he grew the most. We skipped those. And then I didn't quite like that. I think this book should be turned into a play. I think it would work a lot better as a play. I don't think you're actually losing that much by not making it a novel, because there's really not that much narration and prose in the book anyway. And the stuff that is there is already pretty sparse. So I think if you just gave this to a really talented actor and put this on stage, you could say just as much about masculinity through the stage as you could through the written word. So that is my spiel on Flesh, because a lot of people, I'm sure there are many people who dislike this book like me, who just think it's a little bit overhyped. But then there were a lot of people when this shortlist came out, they're like, yay, I love Flesh. It says so much about masculinity. And I'm like, no, it implies a lot about masculinity. It doesn't really say that much about it. But moving on. Okay, next we have Gilead. Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. I read this in July. July was a banger month. It was the first month of the quarter, and it was my best reading month of the quarter, hands down. Perhaps even my best reading month of the entire year so far. Okay, it's either a new favorite or a book of all time. I'm going to put it in book of all time for now. I absolutely loved this book. I cried so hard reading this. I felt so touched and enamored by the writing. I think it's going to be book of all time because there are so many quotes in this that I still think about, even if I can't like remember the exact quote perfectly. I still think about the feelings that they created in me. It just felt, it was a very life-affirming read. It was very tender. The word I use for that book is like tender and humanist. Life is worth living. You know, we're all beautiful people. We are here for a reason. What that reason is, I don't know, but like life has purpose and meaning and is valuable. And sometimes you just need a book to remind you of that because it just never feels like that in the world sometimes. But I love the book. It was so tender. I still need to read like the other, it's part of like a quartet. I still need to read the other 3 books that follow this kind of similar story and time period, but from other characters' perspectives. But I would really recommend Gilead. Okay, The Good Lord Bird. I'll put it in thank you to my library. Again, I think I gave this a 3-star. The tone just didn't quite work for me. So we follow a slave boy. I think his name is Henry. And he is mistakenly identified as like a slave girl by the real life abolitionist John Brown, and is kind of swept up because of that, like one mistaken identity thing is kind of swept up in this big adventure and journey with John Brown. The tone of this book is very comedic, which didn't always land perfectly well for me. I also found this book very repetitive. I think it could have been cut down by 30, 40, 50 pages, 30 pages probably. And I think it would have been stronger because of it. I was honestly bored a lot during it, so it was a little bit of a struggle, but I've heard other people like really connect with this book a lot more than I did. And I do just think some of it was not the exact book for me, but still like objectively, I could see the strengths of the writing and the storytelling, even if it just didn't fully hit for me. So that's why it's gonna go in thank you to my lib, even though I did buy this book. I bought this book full price too, because I was so convinced I was gonna love this book, but we live and we learn. Okay, are we ready, y'all? The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Book of all time. Book of all time. This was, again, these top 3, I read them all in July. It was July, I'm telling you, it was a banger month. It was just 5-star after 5-star. Although some of these, I also read 5 Broken Blades and Dutch House and 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo in July. So July was, it was a roller coaster. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. But The Grapes of Wrath, this book, again, I think it's episode 3 or 4 of my physical TBR diaries. If you want to see me like kind of crash out and like ready to pick up my pitchfork and like go get the guillotine, like go watch that video, because I was just so floored by this book. Up until The Grapes of Wrath, East of Eden was by far like the most untouched of my favorite books. I still like East of Eden more than I like Grapes of Wrath, but being able to read The Grapes of Wrath, I was like, Steinbeck has got it. Like he just has that power. He just can, like, when he's really locked in, especially on his like novels, he can just really speak to the human soul. The Grapes of Wrath is so incredibly good. There are just so many themes and ideas in it that it's hard. It's kind of similar to the bee sting for me, where I cannot talk and connect all of the dots that the author laid in there. And I could just come back to this book a million times and find something new about it. I'm obsessed with the religious allegory and metaphor and imagery that John Steinbeck used in The Grapes of Wrath. Everything about the Christ-like figures that kind of pop out. The ending of this book, so good, so incredibly good, jaw-dropping, shocking, and then you think about it for like 2 seconds, you're like, this is genius. Like everything came together at the end of this book. It was incredible. I love The Grapes of Wrath. Okay, so next we have Leo Tolstoy. We have the death of, I think it's Ivan Ilyich. I think I was saying in my physical TBR episode where I talked about this, I think I was saying Ivan Ilyich, which is like the most Americanization I can give. But yes, this one, I'm gonna put this on want on my shelf. I did buy it secondhand, like at a used bookstore for like $4, which was a steal. I really liked this one. I think I need to like reread it again. I think upon a reread it might bump up to like a new favorite, but for now it is definitely, and honestly it's like my favorite of these 3 so far, so I'll put it at the top of that. Again, we'll do a rearranging at the end if needed. When We Lost Our Heads by Heather O'Neill. So this one is, we'll put this in, will I remember it? I do remember it pretty well. I just don't think this will get much thought for me, in a year's time. I gave this one, I think, a 3-star. It is a retelling of the French Revolution, but set in like the 1800s in Montreal, Canada. And it follows like 2 girls who throughout their entire lives are kind of entwined with each other. They're friends, they're enemies, they're frenemies, they're lovers, like some toxic lesbian vibes going on, but at the same time trying to tell the story of like class struggle and class and gender struggle and how those two things intersect. So it had some very interesting themes. It was just boring, too long. The writing really grated on my nerves, which is a disappointment because I loved Heather O'Neill's other book that I read from her, The Capital of Dreams, which I read in like January of 2025. So will I remember it is where I'm going to land on that. Okay, now we have is this my third Steinbeck so far this video? I've read a lot of Steinbeck this quarter. I'm trying to read all of his works eventually, so might as well plow through some. Of Mice and Men as well is going to go on Want on my shelf. I think some of this is I know how it ended, so it's a little bit separated me. I do think objectively it is a stronger work than Cannery Row, just on pure like emotional impact and on his ability to write characters and focus in on characters in a relationship. Of Mice and Men is stronger than Cannery Row. So I guess I'll put that like that. Yes. But it's definitely not up there to The Grapes of Wrath. People who put Of Mice and Men above The Grapes of Wrath, answer for your crimes. Answer for your crimes, because that is a crime. Like, to me, there's no question. You can put one above the other, personal preference, but like to me, so far, I've read 10 of his books, and so far, there's like no question. East of Eden and Grapes of Wrath are clear 1 and 2, and if you put any other of his works above either of those, I have questions for you. I have questions. I go, that's my controversial opinion. Next, we have The Nightwatchman. I'm going to put this in Will I Remember It. I read this for a book club. If I hadn't been reading it for a book club, I would have DNF'd it. It was boring to me. There was some aspects I really liked. I really liked the plotline with Thomas as the narrator. I liked Thomas, the other narrator, and the other person we kind of spent half of this book with. Her name was Patrice. I didn't care about her. I didn't like how the story ended for some of the characters. There was like a weird love triangle. There were several moments in this book where I was just completely baffled by what we were doing here. But the purpose of reading this book was to learn more about this specific time period. It was set in like the 1950s when the US government was trying to like terminate all of these treaties with like indigenous tribes and take away all of the federal support that they had and recognition that they had, and kind of like literally terminate the idea of like being a Native American even more than it had already been. And I just hadn't known about that time period. So it really taught me a lot about that. The writing itself was good. The story and the characters I did not connect with. So will I remember it? I probably will never come back to it. Okay, next we have Oh Pioneers. I'm going to put this one on Want on my shelf. I really liked this. Again, I'd probably put this maybe up here, something like that. I don't know. Definitely above Demon Copperhead. I don't know if it's above Cannery Row. Maybe it is. I really like the character of Alexandra Bergsum. She is the main character of this book, and she is like the shining star of it. I loved that. The writing, again, was very beautiful, very strong. Willa Cather, I can see why her writing has stuck around and has become classics. There were times, again, I feel like a broken record. Sometimes I just get bored with books. There were a couple times I was bored, but luckily I think the book length is pretty good. It's short and sweet, so it can't like linger too much to the point where I'm like, okay, move on. I just don't think I love the plains. I'm sorry. I think I don't love the landscape of Nebraska. Even with the great writing of Cather, I was like, okay, stop telling me about the plains. But anytime the writing was like about the history of the land and the death and life being built on top of this land, I was locked in. I love that part. But then when it was like plains stretched into the sun and the sun glowed golden over, I was like, okay, I don't care. But again, the main character of Alexandra was really fascinating. I thought it was really interesting to see a character like her written as she was at this time, and I appreciated that aspect. Next, we have Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. This is going to new favorites. You want to say it's dystopian, but it's not really dystopian. Because it's like too real to really be dystopian, but it's set in this kind of near future of Ireland as it comes under control of an authoritarian regime, and it focuses on one family, specifically the mother of the family, as she tries to keep her family intact as the government just cracks down and everything in her life falls apart around her. It is harrowing. It is like, I described it as like you're in a nightmare and you just cannot get out of this nightmare because the character's in a nightmare and they can't get out of it. I highlighted the like crap out of this book. I annotated so much of it. There is a lot, like every single line, it just felt like there was an image there. I think it could have been pared back a little bit. That is like my only real critique of it. Is I think sometimes it was perhaps too obvious. Yeah, it did make me cry, I'm remembering. Did it make me cry at the end? It made me cry about like 2/3 of the way through. I was like, oh, there was this very harrowing scene, and I won't spoil it, but if you've read the book, you might know what it is. That was just so incredibly sad, and my jaw dropped. I did not think that they were going to do that. So it's very, the way I would describe this book is harrowing for sure. I know I said nightmare, but harrowing nightmare is this book. Okay, A Love Song for Ricki Wilde. DNF. It's better than Five Broken Blades. It is miles better than Five Broken Blades. I read about 30 pages and I was just like, listen, this was part of my like August reading slump. And I was like, I don't know why I wanted to pick up a romance while I'm already in a reading slump, because I don't really generally like romance, but I wasn't as cringed by the writing as I thought I was. I did still cringe, but it wasn't as much as I thought I was going to. And I did stop reading the book before the couple even met. So take that for what it's worth. Yeah, it's just not a book for me. And I just didn't think it was fair to myself or this book and this author to like force myself to read it and just not like it. So DNF. Next we have A Song for Leah by George R.R. Martin. I'm a big A Song of Ice and Fire fan, so I'm trying to read more of his non-A Song of Ice and Fire stuff, because he like released a blog post a couple months ago that literally like broke my heart, because he was like, I know the only thing that you guys care about is Game of Thrones, but like I have other projects that I also love. I have other works that I published before Game of Thrones that I also loved. And I'm sorry that you think that I don't care about Game of Thrones. I do care about it. I care about it just as much as I cared about all the other projects that none of you guys ever read. And I was like, George, my peepaw, don't come for him, okay? Like, he's an old man. Like, stop being mean to him. Like, honestly, y'all, like, stop. You're trying to, like, own, like, a 77-year-old man like that. Like, have some class, people. Like, stop. So I read A Song for Leah. Wasn't my favorite, but I think some of it was just because it was so short. It was really interesting to see some of the ideas and themes that he was fascinated with when he was 26. He wrote this when he was 26. And then to see the seeds of things that would come into a bigger, more mature meditation in like Game of Thrones. I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, I think I'm going to put this, where am I going to put this? Honestly, I mean, I don't know if I would buy it, but honestly, I might. I'll put it at the very top of Thank You to My Library. I did read it through my library. It is a very short story. It's a very short novella. It's only like 70 pages. But I don't know. I really wouldn't mind having it on my shelf. We'll come back to that. Okay. Next we have Sour Cherry. This is going to go in Will I Remember It. This is a like modern, I shouldn't say modern, it's a retelling of the Bluebeard myth. I don't know. It was fine. I did like it more than the Nightwatchman. And I think I liked it more than When We Lost Our Heads. I gave it a 3-star. I would have liked it a lot more if it was truly a modern retelling. It's just a retelling, and they still set it in like a kind of fairy tale-esque medieval general area. Like he's a lord of a castle and he has peasants and everything. But then you learn as you're reading it that this is one of his victims telling this story, and they're in like an apartment in New York City. So it's obviously her trying to tell this like a fairy tale, but it's also Bluebeard is real and she is like his wife. When I realized that, I was just like, I wish it was just a modern retelling. Like I just wish it was a modern retelling, because I'm sorry, unpopular opinion, I'm not that interested in the Bluebeard myth in and of itself, especially like the fairy tale parts of it. Like put it in modern day and let me see how a modern man, I mean, I don't really need to see, I can turn on the news to get that, but still see how a modern like Bluebeard can get away with it still the same today, even though he's not a lord. That would have been, I think, more interesting to me personally. So, okay, next we have Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This is gonna go on my shelf. It's close to new favorite. Sorry, it was a little bit too long for me. There were definitely times where I was like, you're a little bit wasting my time. Although what this book does so well, what Susanna Clarke always does so well, is just capture a tone and create an atmosphere. She just has such an incredible imagination, and how she can have a specific tone for a character or like a narration, and that can like just set everything and just create, I don't know, I keep saying the same words, but just create an overall general impression and atmosphere on the reader is really incredible. Like I was really fully into her alternative universe magical like London and magicians, and I thought the comedy in this book really worked for me. The fairies in this book were fantastic. They were scary. They were like terrifying. And I really liked that she kind of went back to the old lore and myth on it and went with more of like a traditional fairy. And by being traditional, I know this was published like 20 years ago, so it was before like this whole like fae craze that we're going through. But reading it today, by being traditional with it, she's actually very unique in like a lot of fantasy books now, because she went traditional, and we're so far removed from like the traditional fae and mythology and lore, where fairies today are just hot men with six packs and are completely separated from their traditional myths. So that was just like very interesting. And obviously she couldn't have predicted that, or maybe she did predict that and she knew that was going to happen. And so she was like, I'll make a more timeless piece. Next we have The Hours. This one is going to go on, is it one on my shelf or is it new favorites? Okay, I think I'm going to put it in I'm going to put it in one on my shelf. I did read this book through my library, and when I finished it, I did go ahead and like immediately buy the book. I think if I reread this, it would move to new favorites for me. The Hours it's definitely a love letter to Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which I read, I think, in Q1, and it follows like 3 women on 3 different time periods. So we literally have several POVs of Virginia Woolf, the real life author of Virginia Woolf, and we're kind of focusing in on her life at a particular point. We see some of the thoughts and the depression that leads to her suicide, or her eventual suicide, that happened in real life. The fictional characters we're following is a woman in like the 1950s. She's a new mother and a wife, and we can see how much she is struggling to put on and pretend as and perform as a happy mother. You know, while she's going through this, she is reading Mrs. Dalloway and is very enamored by Virginia Woolf's writing, and she's just trying to struggle and figure out, how can I be a mother to this 2-year-old son that I love? She doesn't quite understand why she's not happy enough. Why can't she, be the thing that she knows that she should be based on society standards? And then we're in 1999 following a woman named Clarissa. Her first name is Clarissa, so her friends call her Mrs. Dalloway, even though that's not her last name. And she as well is trying to throw a party, and we just follow her through one day in her life as she's trying to throw this party. And we see slowly these 3 women's lives, their struggles kind of intertwine and create a sum bigger than their individual parts, if that makes sense. So it's very complex and very well written. He's kind of writing like Mrs. Dalloway was written, much easier to understand, I will say, while still keeping that style, which I really liked. If you read Mrs. Dalloway, I would definitely recommend reading The Hours as well. You can read The Hours without Mrs. Dalloway. I think you can totally do that. I think you would appreciate certain things and understand certain references and Easter eggs more if you read Mrs. Dalloway first. But if you read The Hours and you love it, then you should definitely read Mrs. Dalloway after that. Next, we have The Moon is Down by John Steinbeck. This one is going to new favorites. This is definitely one of my new favorite of his short stories. I don't necessarily know if I would put it like above all of these, maybe above Prophet Song. It's like a fictionalized-ish telling of like a Nazi-occupied small town in Europe during World War II. And we just focus in on this town as citizens are occupied, and how can they find courage to fight and stand up against such tyranny and violence. I like it just as its own product, but I think some of my appreciation for this book is just like the real life context around it, about how this was illegally published and smuggled into Nazi occupied countries during the war, and how people there really related to this book when they could read it, and once the war ended, how they celebrated it by reprinting it legally and selling out of it. And so I think so much of that real life kind of colors my perception of it, and I really like it. Okay, Tortilla Flat, I'm going to put right at the end of new favorites as well. This is another Steinbeck. Okay, Tortilla Flat is going up here. Now, here's the thing where it's like, is Tortilla Flat a better book than Of Mice and Men? No, I don't even know if it's a better book than Cannery Row, but I think I liked it a little bit more. I don't know, Tortilla Flat might go on one on my shelf. I don't know. I really liked it. I think I was just very charmed by the King Arthur framing of it, and the way that he had his characters talk in like old English, like thous and wilts, and it's very all proper English, even though these men are not that well educated, they're not that courtly or courageous even. He just gives serious consideration to their everyday desires, everyday small things about their life, even if that's just, hey, I want to stay home and drink all of this wine today. How can I logic my way to that conclusion? I was very charmed by that. So, okay, again, is this my 5th Steinbeck on this? Travels with Charley. This one is going to go to, honestly, thank you to my library. It wasn't my favorite. No, it's going to go on one on my shelf. But it's gonna go like down here because I do have it on my shelf. I did buy it. It had very high highs for me. There were certain chapters and certain moments of this book I absolutely loved, but then a lot of it was again, we're traveling through the plains of Nebraska again, and I don't care. It's interesting because like it's kind of presented as this nonfiction piece of his journals as he's traveling. He's on this road trip through America. Come to find out at the end, it's probably a little bit more fictionalized than you would expect, or that is presented. But then when I find out that it's like a little bit more fictionalized, I'm just like, and this is still the best he could do. Like, this is still the most interesting story that he thought he could like fit into a somewhat realistic travelogue. Steinbeck, I don't know what was going on there. This book did make me want to go get a new dog though, because my last one passed about 2 years ago, so made me want to have a dog again. And I like some of the small moments of Steinbeck family man that we got, because he doesn't really allow you to see those moments, I think, a lot. As a Steinbeck fan, I thought those insights into his life were the most interesting part of this book. Okay, I cannot say this word. Universality by Natasha Brown is going to go Will I Remember It? Again, this is another one I read for the Booker long list. I liked it. Did I? No, maybe this goes to Thank You to My Library then, actually. Yeah, I would say Thank You to My Library. I think, honestly, this might be like I like it, like, maybe it's better than, it is a better, probably, product overall than A Song for Laya. So I'm gonna give it to Thank You to My Library, but I think I might need to reread it. Otherwise it might go to Will I Remember It, because I think I'm already forgetting some things from it. It's just very short. There are definitely some interesting themes here about fake news and how news can be manipulated by, you know, certain individuals, how it can become a marketing or a political statement, which I think everyone knows. But I really thought the way that the author explores that idea is very interesting. I love how every single character in this book is horrendous and awful. They are all terrible people. They are also corrupted and greedy and fake and insincere, callous, and they all think that they are the best person on the planet. And again, I think the kind of disconnect between their perception of themselves and even like their friends' perceptions of them and the reader's perception of them was very well done. We have one book left, and it's been the book that I've been ignoring and not getting to for the past however long this video is, and that is A Farewell to Arms. Now, this is in my latest Physical TBR Diaries video, so if you want my full defense of this, because I think this is going to be very unpopular, if you want my full defense of this, go watch that video, okay? I just did not connect with Hemingway's writing in this book, which I was very surprised by. I was convinced that I would absolutely love this book. I was convinced that I would love his writing because obviously I like Steinbeck quite a lot. Steinbeck was compared to Hemingway, was called the lesser Hemingway, was called a Hemingway copycat. Well, in my personal opinion, in that case, the student surpassed the master because I just did not connect with this book. Some of it is, unfortunately, for Hemingway. I'm not a big romance person, and I don't love books about war, specifically World War I. I find World War I and World War II very hard for me to like really get engaged with and interested in. I don't quite know why that is, but that's what happened with this one. So, and I found Catherine baffling. I just found her baffling. I thought at some points, I was like, is this supposed to be a true like love story romance? Like I just didn't believe the love story between the two of them. And at the end of the day, I just didn't connect to the prose. So it's going to be a cardinal sin for me in that it deeply disappointed me. And it deeply annoyed me. And it deeply bored me. It hit all three, trifecta. And now it is a better book. Like, objectively, it is a better book. It is better written than Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And honestly, it's a better written book than many of the books above it. I'll give you that. Just because Hemingway is a good writer doesn't necessarily make up for his lack of ability to make me connect with the characters, to make me connect with the story. His writing just does not work for me, at least this one. I will be giving him 1 or 2 more chances. I want to try a short story, maybe a short story collection or something. I don't know if I want to do Old Man in the Sea, because that one sounds very depressing, which I guess is probably par for the course for Hemingway. But there are certain passages in this book that I still remember. I think about the way that the world, breaks people down, kills them, breaks their soul, destroys them. I loved that stuff. If this book was 100 pages shorter, I also think that this book would be much better for me personally, much stronger. I would love to just take a red pen to like half of this book, but that's where it stands now. Okay, so do we need to rearrange anything? I'm pretty happy with this. I wouldn't say all of these are in exact order of like how much I loved them. I would say Grapes of Wrath, The Bee Sting, and Gilead are pretty much in order of how much I love them. New favorites, Cry the Beloved Country was probably my favorite of these. I would say Tortilla Flat is probably my least favorite. I don't know, Tortilla Flat could be moved down to one on my shelf. In between here, yeah, I would say this is about right. For the most part, the line by line is about how much I would say I like these books on that line. So like the Dutch House could honestly be moved. Honestly, the Dutch House could be moved to Will I Remember It. It wasn't like a bad, it's only staying here because I literally did DNF it. The good news is any of the books that I did finish, I didn't put in the worst books category with the DNF. So I DNF books that I wasn't interested in, which was great. And then the ones that I did finish, I managed to like, at least they weren't the worst books ever. Even the ones I really disliked, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Farewell to Arms, there was enough value and interesting things there or quality of writing that it was not the worst book I've ever read. Honestly, the worst book I've ever read might honestly be Five Broken Blades. I read it for 30 pages. It gave me like heart palpitations with how upset I was getting by the poor quality of writing. But yeah, that's gonna be it, I think, for this video. That is my tier ranking for Q3. Like I said, I have tier rankings for Q1 and Q2 on a playlist that will be linked somewhere. Also, if you want more in-depth reviews on almost any one of these books, you should watch like episodes, I think 5, 4, and 3 of my physical TBR diaries. The vast majority of these books I've been reading from my physical TBR, which is different from previous quarters where I was reading many of them through my library, which is why I had such a vast pile up of my physical TBR. So I have to like balance the two. But yeah, if you want more in-depth like reviews or thoughts, specific quotes that I like from some of these books, go watch some of those other videos on my channel. All right, that's gonna be it for this video. I'm Kiki. I've been talking about books. Time to stop talking about books so we can go back to read more. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe, like, all of that stuff. Have a good day.